So, what makes you, you? Is it the code that's written in your DNA from the moment you're born? Or is it everything that happens to you after you're born? It's one of the biggest questions out there, nature versus nurture. And today, believe it or not, we're going to look for an answer in a story that's 700 years old.
You know, this is the kind of question that people have been arguing about for centuries. Are we born with a set path, a destiny written into our very being? Or are we more like blank slates and our experiences are what write the story? Usually people look to modern science for the answers, but we're going to go somewhere completely different.
To get a fresh perspective on all this, we're going to turn back the clock, and I mean way back, to the 13th century. We're going to dive into the work of this brilliant Persian poet named Saadi. And his collection of stories, The Rose Garden, isn't just poetry, folks. It's absolutely packed with some startlingly modern ideas about what makes us tick.
Tucked away inside this ancient book is this, well, you could call it an incredible case study. It's a story Saadi tells about crime, justice, and what happens when you decide to run a pretty high-stakes social experiment on a single human life.
So the story kicks off with a pretty big problem. There's this gang of thieves, and they've taken over a fortress high up in the mountains. From there, they're basically running the show. They control the roads, they're choking off all the trade, and the whole region is living in constant fear. The government just can't seem to get a handle on them.
So the king's advisors, they knew they had to get smart about this. They sent their best soldiers to spy on the fortress, just waiting for that perfect moment of weakness. And sure enough, right after a big raid, when the thieves were all celebrating and totally exhausted, the soldiers stormed the hideout in the middle of the night. They captured the entire gang without even a fight. The captured thieves are hauled in front of the king, and he does not mess around. His judgment is swift and it is absolute. Execution. For every single one of them. Case closed. Or so it seemed. But then there's a complication. Standing there, among all these hardened criminals, is a young boy. He's the son of the thief chief. He's barely a teenager, you know? His life has really only just begun. And this, right here, is where our story really gets going with a really tough moral choice. And this one kid, this one choice, it sparks this amazing debate between the king and his most trusted advisor, the vizier. And what they end up arguing about is, well, it's basically a 13th century showdown between nature and nurture.
Okay, so here's where you see the two sides laid out perfectly. The king is firmly on team nature. He thinks the boy comes from bad stock, that his foundation is bad and he just can't be changed. Sparing him, he says, is like putting out a fire but leaving a hot ember behind that could just start a new blaze. But the vizier, he's all about nurture. He argues, look, he's just a kid. His character isn't set in stone. If we give him a good education, put him around good people, he can be saved.
And the king, man, he just drives his point home with this powerful and honestly kind of chilling metaphor. In his eyes, you just can't change what something is at its core. A wolf is a wolf. Doesn't matter where you raise it. This right here is the heart of the nature argument. Biology is destiny.
But the vizier, he's got to come back, and it's a powerful one. He brings up this famous story from the Quran about a dog that hung out with these righteous men, the companions of the cave, and just by being around them, it became something more. His point is crystal clear. A good environment, good role models, that can transform anyone, maybe even overcoming their basic instincts.
So, believe it or not, the vizier, with some backup from other advisors, actually persuades the king. The king is not happy about it, but he agrees. He says, fine, I'll grant your request, though I still think it's a terrible idea. And just like that, the experiment begins. The boy is taken into the palace and given the absolute best of everything. Fine clothes, amazing food, and an education from the most brilliant teachers in the whole kingdom. And this is where the story takes a really tragic turn. After years of this perfect, privileged upbringing, the young man throws it all away. He finds some local thugs, gets in with them, and in this final brutal act of betrayal, he murders the very man who saved his life, the vizier, along with his two sons. He steals all their money and runs back to that same mountain fortress, taking his father's place as the new chief of the thieves.
Wow, what a shocking outcome, right? So, what does it all mean? To get a better handle on it, let's jump forward about 700 years and look at this story through the lens of modern psychology, specifically Albert Bandura's famous social learning theory.
Okay, so the core idea behind Bandura's theory is actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. We learn by watching other people. That's it. We don't always need direct rewards or punishments. A huge chunk of who we are is shaped just by observing the models in our lives, seeing what they do and what happens to them when they do it.
Bandura actually broke this down into 4 key steps. First, you have to pay attention to the person you're watching. Second, you have to retain it. Remember what you saw. Third, you need to be able to physically reproduce the action. But that last one, motivation, that is the absolute key to our story. You need a reason, some kind of internal drive to copy that behavior. And that's exactly where the vizier's experiment might have gone wrong.
All right, so now for the really cool part. Let's put Saadi's ancient story and Bandura's modern theory right next to each other, because the connections are just fascinating.
And this slide just lays out the overlap perfectly. The vizier's plan was pure social learning theory. Give the kid a better environment with better models and he'll learn to be better. But the story's tragic ending shows us something crucial. Just being exposed to something isn't enough. The boy was exposed to the good models in the palace, sure. But his internal motivation, maybe what Saadi would call his innate nature, drove him to copy the one model that really truly mattered to him, his father, the thief.
So after the boy's betrayal, the king is just left with this really bitter, cynical conclusion. He sees the whole attempt at rehabilitation not just as a failure, but as something that actively brought harm to good people, the vizier and his sons.
But hold on, is Saadi really saying that nature always wins? Well, not exactly. This story isn't a hard and fast rule. It's a warning. It's a stark reminder that while nurture is powerful, a really strong innate disposition, what we'd call nature, can be an incredibly tough, sometimes even an impossible force to overcome.
And that just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. A poet from 700 years ago laid out this debate with a psychological depth that you'd expect from a modern textbook. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other profound insights about who we really are just sitting there, waiting to be rediscovered in the wisdom of the past?